Travis, Part 2, Regenesis Permaculture Pasture to Paradise webinar. In this part, we're going to look at the concept of food forest. And here you'll find the first link to, to another document. This is a 15-page document. We've created it with the financial support, inspiration, and vision of Tam Ingoli, is a friend, brother, um, with the longevity project in Costa Rica, kind enough to support this for his farm and allow me to use it to continue and support humanity and myself. So this 15-page document goes into great depth about why we plant food forests and what they are. Um, Basically, a food forest is a man-altered system. It imitates a natural forest by having different layers. For example, a ground cover, herb layer, often with tubers, shrubs and vines, smaller trees, medium trees, large overstory trees. In the tropics, we have palms. Some are short understories, others are emergent, as well as the banana and all the related musas in the banana family. And so the difference between a natural forest and a food forest is basically if humans are living in this forest, it's we could call it a food forest. And humans have been doing this for thousands and thousands of generations, much longer than we've been practicing annual agriculture. And maybe in some cases we were doing both, doing some small scale annual agriculture, but mostly for the large majority of human history, we've been living in near food forests. One notable exception maybe is the migratory herders, people who depend more on animals and live in pasture. Of course, these people as well, in most cases, had food forests that they would frequent, but they would take the animals in between on the pastures. So I'm going to go back to the Pasture to Paradise document and just touch on the vertical layering. Yes, the understory often is more shaded. In many cases, it's tubers, medicinals, some herbs. And as we go up, the trees get more full light. And so as we come down into the understory, they're in many cases here perennial greens or berries, um, and types of fruit trees that can tolerate some shade. For example, the cacao, coffee, the snake fruit, and vines. For example, vanilla, black pepper. Yeah, the list goes on. There's more in this other document. And now if we're converting a pasture into a food forest, we're going to use this natural succession. This is a natural occurrence. It's a natural phenomenon of how ecosystems restore themselves. So for much of the planet, before humans cut down the forests, there was forest. Not in all parts, but in many areas. And in these areas, unless they've been damaged so severely and are undergoing desertification, they will naturally reform forests over time by this process of natural succession. And here's a little diagram showing as time progresses from the left to the right, and we get into perennial grasses, which the pastures here are, then pioneers can come in, pioneer shrubs and some short-lived trees, and create habitat for some of the more long-lived trees to come in and gain a foothold and eventually recreate a canopy and shade out the pasture and resume as forest. And so there's a type here of syntropic farming, I'm going to put a link in there for you. As well, in the Food Forest document, there are already many links to the syntropic. Syntropic is kind of the new buzzword. You've probably heard of it. Porvenir Design. These are some friends. And basically, the syntropic farming or syntropic gardening, syntropic agriculture uses natural succession, but it's accelerated. We plant things very densely, including not only the target fruit trees, but lots of support species, lots of pioneers that we prune very intensely to create biomass and to stimulate the metabolism of the system. So we get more photosynthesis, more biomaterial. We feed the microorganisms and thus rebuild soil, and our target trees thrive because of this. And this syntropic farming in the permaculture is really best in zones 2, 3, 4, and also the edges between zones. I feel it's really important to know that if we talk about the edges being where the action is, personally in my projects, I like to emphasize as much the edges between zones as the distinct zones themselves, especially if we're creating villages where we have homes in different areas and where we want much of it to be forest garden. Instead of having a large zone 4 and a large zone 3, prefer much to have zone 2 and 3 and 4 interwoven, and the edges between them, for example, often being rows of living fence. Here, the madero negro, or the ice cream bean, or guachipilin, or swales on contour, many things that can be the edges between zones that serve as trails and access to move water or people from one area to another. Another point to talk about is ecological mimicry, and particularly here, there's analog forestry. This is a contemporaries of Bill Mollison, who's the father of permaculture. They developed analog forestry sort of hand in hand as Bill was coining the term permaculture and creating his first books with David Holmgren. And basically in analog forestry, which I really recommend for a type of zone 4 forest, where we're managing a little bit but not very intensively, we're kind of letting it more do its own thing. And in analog forestry, for example, we go into the oldest forest around us, the most intact forest ecosystem that we can find nearby that's in the same climate zone where we are, and we quantify it. So in we could say a 50 meter by 50 meter plot, we can count the number of tall overstory trees, and if we can identify them, even much better. And so, for example, here in this example, we might have 3 giant fig trees in this 50 by 50 meter plot. And what we do in analog forestry is we substitute for the fig tree, something that humans really don't eat, but a lot of wildlife eats. We substitute that for a similar tree, so another tree in the same family or with the same growth habits. And so a great candidate here would be a jackfruit. Yes, both the figs, ficus, and jackfruit are in the Moraceae family, as the mulberries. And so being in the Moraceae family, they share similar traits, and we could substitute them in this analog forestry.